Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. A warm welcome to Visionary Pulse with me, your host Farzana Mayet, a segment that always focuses on chatting to game changers and change makers. And tonight is certainly no different, as we're going to be chatting to one such game changer and change maker. Fasiha Hassan is a dynamic youth leader and public servant, currently serving as a Member of Parliament in South Africa. As one of the youngest representatives elected to office, she is committed to amplifying the voices of youth and women in governments, with a sharp focus on tackling youth unemployment and expanding access to education. Before her election to Parliament, Fasiha made history as the youngest member of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature during the 6th Democratic term. There, she broke barriers as the chairperson of the COCTA and E-Governance Portfolio Committee, ranking among the youngest parliamentary committee chairs in South Africa. She also led the Economic Development, Environment, Culture and Rural Development Committee. In addition to serving the Education Portfolio Committee, OCPOL Oversight Committee on the Premier and Legislature, and the Agriculture and Environment Committee. Fasiha is currently a spokesperson for the ANC Youth League's 26th National Executive Committee. Her leadership journey includes role as Deputy Convener, Acting Deputy President of the ANC's National Youth Task Team, as the member of the ANC Renewal Commission as well, where she worked alongside prominent figures and a co-organizer at the Fees Must Fall, or rather #Fees Must Fall movement at Wits University. Her relentless advocacy earned her the 2019 Student Peace Prize in Norway, a testament to her commitment to social justice. Driven by the belief that young people must shape their own future, Fasiha continues to champion equitable policies and transformative change in South Africa's political landscape. Fasiha, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining me. Wow.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me on your show.
What a vast portfolio. I am so proud sitting here right now. Let's start from the beginning. Fees, #Fees Must Fall. How did that all begin?
Yeah, so it's 10 years actually. It's 2025. So it's about 10 years since we started Fees Must Fall. We all know it now as a very successful, broad-based, mass-based kind of social movement led by young people. But it was the start of so many young people who were taking up our voices effectively, taking up that agency and demanding for a better education system. But very importantly, an education system that was accessible, because even now, universities, colleges, etc., are incredibly expensive, and so many people are having the doors shut on them purely because they just can't afford it. And that effectively is what Fees Must Fall was trying to address, and of course still continues to address, because we haven't gotten to the point that we really want to be in.
But you were there at inception, right? So to say.
Yeah, we were there from the beginning.
How did you decide, Fasiha? How did you decide that I need to get involved here? I need to be championing this?
I always trace my activism actually to my Islam, right? It's our North Star, it's our guiding point.
Absolutely.
And Islam is inherently about social justice and fighting for what's right. And so in many ways, people dissociate politics and activism and all of that from their Islamic purpose. And those two things for me are one and the same.
It intertwines.
Exactly, it intertwines. And I also grew up with parents who were very involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. So activism in our home was quite an important thing. And we got to university. Obviously, I had been very involved in the Palestinian advocacy space already, but just witnessing young students like me sitting next to me in class, but just not having opportunities, not having ability to buy textbooks, right, because they're so expensive, not having their fees paid. I mean, so many of us got this tutoring, that tutoring, whether it's at high school or university level.
You needed that.
Exactly. Yes. And going through that experience with somebody who deserves those same opportunities but didn't get them purely because of where they were in terms of class position, race position, etc., really pushed us to say, let's do something about it. And that's actually what motivated myself and a number of others to run for the Student Representative Council, the SRC, at Wits University. And that's actually the platform that we waged Fees Must Fall from.
So that actually catapulted now the whole #Fees Must Fall movement. But Fasiha, when you started off, like for a lot of students that may be watching right now, because you're an inspiration to so many, like what was the feelings like and some of the setbacks that you faced? I think we need to get into that as well, because
and also
people
be honest.
see, it's good to
you're
be
right.
honest.
People see one side of it, they see the other side of it. They don't see well, let's be honest, the first thing is it's an incredible amount of work. Right. I always tell this to my young cousins and mentees and friends who are much younger. I say there's There's no shortcut to hard work. It doesn't matter the industry you're in.
Absolutely.
You've got to roll up your sleeves. You've got to take the L. You've
Be
really got
prepared.
to, exactly, you've just got to invest and push and push. And it's easy to say, it's very difficult to do, especially, I mean, you know this, Farzana, I work weekends. I work late into the
Yes.
night. I work pretty much every day of the week.
There's a lot of sacrifices that comes on your end. You were telling me off air as well.
Yeah.
And this is really inspiring, and a lot of it doesn't get shown on social media, you know, for the whole world to see, but it's a lot of hard work that goes into it.
Exactly, and I think also some amount of resilience. The truth is you're not always going to be able to attend your friend's party or,
Yes,
you
there's a
know,
lot
this
of
family
sacrifices.
event, or, you know, and it's about understanding, and this is the big thing of what I've had to learn, know your why. You know, why are you pursuing this? What is the motivation behind it? Because when your motivation and your intentions are sincere, as Allah has always taught us in the Quran and in other forms, it makes it easier, because when you're pushing through and pushing through, you like, well, actually my motivation is something much bigger. It's about the bigger picture, and it helps you to push through. But maybe also to say one thing I have learned in the last 10 years since Fees Must Fall, is that you also have to be able to look after yourself to be able to be active. And that's something that I've only learned recently. So I'm like trying to eat healthy now. I'm trying to exercise. I'm trying to go for runs, go to the gym. And even though it's tiring to put that in your schedule,
It's something that has to be done.
you have to,
Okay,
because
right.
otherwise you're just going to crumble and collapse or burn out. And burnout takes years to recover from. And that's, I think, the very not glamorous, not sexy part of the work that we do. And it's also about balancing. It's not about being selfish. It's about saying sometimes you need to just take a step back, eat that healthy meal, or go for that run early in the morning.
Yes.
And that's how you get through the day.
More on that when we come back after the break. Welcome back after the break. You are tuning into Visionary Pulse with me, your host Farzana Mayet, in conversation with the incredibly inspiring Fasiha Hassan. So Fasiha, the hashtag Fees Must Fall movement happened. A lot was achieved by then, or since then, should I say. You've gone on and achieved great heights. I'm tremendously sitting here and so proud of what you've achieved. One of the youngest members of parliament, how did that come about?
Yeah, so I don't think Fees Must Fall is ever going to be over
Right.
until we fully achieved a situation in which any person or young person in the country who wants to study is not held back by any sort of financial status at all. So that's it. But it's also important because it sort of forced us to realize that that site of struggle was only higher education. We needed to, or at least we want to see, a broader change in society.
Okay.
And that's actually what the ANC then said to us, and a number of different political parties to other young people. Said, you talk a lot, we can see you're there in the front, but let's see what you can actually do.
Okay.
And that's
Walk
when
the
they,
talk, so
yeah,
to
walk
speak.
the talk. Can you walk the talk? And then they came to us late 2018, and ultimately we stood for public office in 2019.
Okay.
And I was elected at 25 to the Gauteng legislature. You mentioned some of that earlier. And then now in 2024, I was just elected to parliament at the age of 30. So now I'm in a very new terrain. It is a site of struggle parliament. I sit on very different portfolios. I did do education work in my first term, but now I sit on the Electricity and Energy Portfolio Committee.
Wow.
I'm the whip, so just sort of below the chair. And then I'm the whip for the Mineral and Petroleum Resources Committee. Very new staff, for me at least. And I also sit on the Judicial Service Commission. So that's the body that appoints judges in the country. And from what we can tell, I'm probably the youngest person to ever sit on the JSC. And it's important because, you know, in the Muslim community, especially as a Muslim woman,
Right.
you're often told, both directly and indirectly, that there's a particular space for you in society.
And you're not supposed to go beyond that
Yeah,
space.
don't laugh too loudly. Don't be too friendly. Don't do this. You're wearing too much. You know, all these different things that I think so many of us were subjected to make ourselves smaller, because the community sometimes didn't, or felt very threatened, I think, by strong women. And why I'm saying all of this is that we're not doing all the things I mentioned for me or for the immediate people around us. It's for, inshallah, millions of young women and women generally
Still to come.
still
Yes.
to come, who the ceiling's not here. We've completely broken through. and the sky's the limit. You know, you can do the things that you want to do. You can envision a different world.
Don't set limits.
Exactly, and don't settle, right? We're so often taught to, and there's no, I think, negative on making sabr. We should. I think that's an important characteristic, but it's used as a way to make you less of yourself. And if there's one thing, inshallah, we hope to achieve in our lifetimes, is for women in our community to not feel like they have to be less.
Absolutely,
You can be
I love that.
all of it on your
Why
terms.
not? Nobody's stopping you, right?
Exactly, and I think the world is changing. I'm not saying it's easy. I come from the same community, we all do.
Yes, we've all been through that,
exactly.
but it looks easy. But that's something that I'd like you to elaborate on, Fasiha, before we move on to your, you know, you've achieved so much, but before we move on to the accolades, it's important also to talk about the struggles and some of the hardships and some of the segregation that you faced.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. Can you elaborate a bit more on that for our viewers?
Yeah, it's been a difficult one. So Fees Must Fall was actually maybe just before that, I was the first woman chairperson of the Muslim Students Association in WITS. And this was the first time in my life where I encountered very, unfortunately, violent, not necessarily physically violent. When we use the word violence, we mean intimidation, harassment, all of that kind of thing, of men in the community. So many Muslim men who said, well, a woman or a girl can't be the chair of the MSA because you're a woman. And that was the first time where I really had to face down some of those fears. And I'll be honest with you, it was terrifying, very, very difficult. You know, you come home in tears most days. You're working with people who don't respect you, but more importantly, don't see you as a human being. And that was really a baptism of fire. Fast forward, Fees Must Fall. So many of the people in the community, some were very good, very proud of us, and others were like, oh, look at what they're wearing. Look at them interacting with boys. Not, this is a moment for the Muslim community to be so proud that we have young women.
This young woman has achieved.
Yeah, at the forefront of something that is so history making. That
so profound,
exactly. And putting, and this is the big one, that putting Islam back onto the map, you know, in forms of dawah. Dawah isn't just the traditional formats that we think about. It's about the fact that we exist in a secular country, but our entire mannerisms and the work that we do, those are dawah, acts of dawah. And
everything that, how we carry ourselves as well, absolutely.
And I even found it now. I mean, I've just recently gotten married, and my husband was not born a Muslim.
Right.
He reverted to Islam. He's Black African. So I know it was a bit of a shock for the community, you know, and so many people afterwards said nice things, but I know there wasn't always this, you know, sort of positive, supporting notion. And again, I had to remind everybody, if we as a Muslim community don't step up and integrate and actually showcase Islam in a positive notion, we can't be shocked
how can we expect the next person to do that?
Exactly. And Kuli and I, inshallah, we're trying to also create a different kind of narrative, that Islam is completely compatible, like I said, with our activism, is completely compatible in South Africa. And I'll just end this part on this point. You know, in our country, we do not have to be ashamed of our Islam. Our Islam can take on so many different forms. And if we do that, I do believe the propagation of it will, inshallah, increase. And I think when we go into our communities, when we go into townships, when you do that, how you do it is so important. And I think there's such an opportunity for us as
I
the
do
community.
agree with you, and it's so important, the message that you are sending out there. And like you're saying, that, you know what, we need to be the change we wish to see. And the better people that we can do it by is by leading by example. We've got to lead by example.
Exactly like you. And Farzana, you've done incredible stuff also with your women empowerment, and I think those who are watching the show also need to know that we stand on the shoulders of yourselves and so many other women who opened up the space for us to enter not only into these leadership positions, but just to be confidently us.
To say there is somebody watching and somebody is proud of you.
Exactly, exactly.
So more on that when we come back after the break. Welcome back after the break. You are tuned into Visionary Pulse. This is your host, Farzana Mayet, in conversation with Fasiha Hassan. So Fasiha, we were talking about your role as one of the youngest members of parliament, you know, some of the challenges you faced, the way you've overcome it. You were really, really an inspiration to so many. And something that we're going to touch on now that's going to be taking place in the next few weeks is our budget.
Yeah. So the budget is occupied everybody in the country, and rightfully so.
Right.
It's also the first budget that's been tabled in this new GNU, this Government of National Coalition, and actually it's a good test of our democracy because it's a budget that needs to be negotiated, and Auntie Farzana, down to the line item of pretty much everything.
And I know you're pretty pedantic. You're extremely pedantic, let's put it that way.
And that's also why it's been a really hectic time period. But I think it is important to talk about it because,
absolutely.
you know, there was this initial proposal of a VAT increase of 0.5 percentage points this year, and was intended for next year an additional 0.5 percentage points. And even us in the ANC were extremely uncomfortable because you don't want to increase VAT. The increase of VAT means that the poor and the working class shoulder the burden of paying for the fiscus. So it's a very difficult position to be in. On the one hand, you have to build schools. You have to upgrade your clinics. We need, I mean, I sit in electricity. We need more funding towards renewable energy, to the fixing and turnaround of Eskom. All of these are critical things, critical.
Right.
You need money to do that. How do you get money, right? And that's been the big discussion point over the last few weeks. So there's lots of talks of, do we increase the corporate tax? Do we then, well, basically, one thing we all agree on, Auntie Farzana, is that the VAT increase is something that we need to put a stop on.
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you're saying this on air.
Yeah, I'm saying this on air, it's on record. Even as the ANC,
that,
in fact, to be very frank, we were extremely unimpressed with what National Treasury and the Minister of Finance had put forward, because we felt that it just didn't take into account how under pressure we are. I mean, if you look at the rise in cost of living, the rise in cost of rent, if you go to the shops now, the same 100 rand you used to buy stuff, I mean, you
can't buy the same, absolutely.
Less than half,
yeah,
right?
I've got to agree with you
exactly. There. And now I'm my own household, I'm married.
Now you're married,
so now
lady, so you know the expenses,
more. Right? Exactly. So what we're actually trying to do is, in fact, we've already started this process of the financial modelling, the economic modelling, to find money from elsewhere.
Okay.
It might mean an increase in corporate tax. It might mean different ways. But what we don't want to do is put more pressure on the consumer. We don't want to increase inflation.
Oh, I love that.
So that's actually why I look the way I look, and why, if you see senior leaders across political parties, that we look the way we do, is because there's a lot of sleepless nights trying to find a way. Now, that takes us into a new space, right? We're in a political era in this country where it is going to be a little bit shaky.
Okay, yes.
And that, unfortunately or fortunately, is always how it was going to be.
That's the way it has to be, yes.
Because in any mature democracy, and even in our constitution, it always envisioned having a multi-party democracy. And so maybe it's important to say to our viewers that even though it looks messy, and it is a bit messy, it's not always going to be messy. We're also learning how to negotiate a budget. We're also learning how to do things correctly. Because in the past, it was a greater majority. It was much easier for us. So if we had an issue of the VAT increase, you guys wouldn't even have known about it, would have dealt with it internally.
Yes.
But because we're at a 40% mark, now we need to say, okay, how do we find alternative solutions? So maybe it's important to say that we are fully committed to finding an alternative, even as I speak to you, even as our listeners and our viewers are watching this.
Yes, it's very important and imperative for them to, you know, pay cognizance to the fact that, and I love what you just said, you know, you come here looking like this because there's a lot of sleepless nights as well. And a lot of people think, oh no, you know, it's not that way. But you off air as well, you've been telling me of a lot of the challenges that you're facing as well, to make sure that the community at large is taken care of.
And
hats off.
And I think also why it's important is, you know, it's easy to look around what's going on in the country with the issues of crime and corruption, which we're fighting. The issues, there's so many, right? Difficulties. And it's easy to get or feel very hopeless or to feel very disillusioned. And I think there's an important message, Auntie Farzana, that must come across here. And that is that there is hope. I could be working anywhere. There are so many young people across the government space, across the public sector, who are actively choosing to be in these spaces because we fundamentally see a better future in this country. And we want to be a part of that. And does it mean it will be easy? No. Does it mean that there'll be lots of sleepless nights and difficulties? Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
But it's also our responsibility.
But will it be worth it? Absolutely, yes.
It will definitely be worth it. And in the same way, there was responsibility on the senior leaders of different areas, of Uncle Kathy, Uncle Lalu Chiba, you know, your Helen Joseph, Nelson Mandela, Walter. So all of these people, Oliver Tambo, imagine they had gave up. Imagine they said this thing's too difficult.
We would have faced a much more different South Africa right now, where you and I would have not had the opportunities that we have today.
Exactly. And so we must persevere and we must pursue a different future. And that's why I'm also saying there are so many incredibly qualified, hardworking, honest, this is very important, honest, ethical young people and people in general who are still in these spaces, who are actively fighting. And that's why you're seeing in different parts of the country, different interventions. You're seeing us, as I spoke about, the budget intervention, but you're also seeing a new generation of leaders who are coming out. And I don't just mean under the age of 35. You're seeing in the ANC, in different political parties, generations of leaders who are now saying, actually, we're going to change the game. We're going to
change the narrative.
We're going to change the narrative. And if there isn't some amount of hope in that, I don't know what is.
Wow. That was certainly, you know, inspiration at its best. And I think, you know, our viewers, there's such a big takeaway from this.
Yeah.
And there's only positivity that we can look forward to. So, Fasiha, before we leave, love and leave you, you know, a message of inspiration to all our viewers out there, please.
In 2015, when we started Fees Must Fall, nobody believed that we would do much.
And it would gain such momentous traction.
People were like, it's a pipe dream, you're just jumping around, not much is going to happen.
But you literally laid in front of
sometimes you forget about those things, moving vehicles and such. But yeah, so everybody didn't feel or felt that nothing was going to come of it. And we did in 10 days what wasn't achieved in years before that. So that same fire that exists within us, whether we're millennials or Gen Zs or whatever it is, alphas that are coming through, that same impatience that I know the older generation gets very angry with us about, that very same fire is actually what pushes us for change. It's what's pushing us as a youth generation across the world to say, actually, we're not going to accept the genocide in Gaza. We're going to speak up against it, not only in South Africa.
And it's up to us to do so,
Exactly. We're seeing encampments across the world of young people who are saying we disassociate from their government positions. We're very lucky. We have a government that is pro-Palestine, that is pushing at the ICJ, at the ICC. We are very lucky. In other countries, they don't have that. And you are seeing this generation of young people who are coming and actually saying, no, we completely disagree. We're going to stand at this particular protest and picket line. We're going to start making sure that BDS is something that we do. And I use this as an example because I do feel that we are in a moment in the world's history where things are changing. And
we can be part of that change, Fasiha.
Exactly.
That's the most important thing.
If there's one takeaway, our voices are important. Everything that we say and do can liberate an entire nation, not only ourselves, many, many different people. If you look at what's going on in Sudan, if you look at what's going on in Yemen, in Lebanon, all over the world, there is a moment for us in the global south. There's a moment for us in the Muslim world to now step up. And I do think when we look back at this version in history, let's make sure we were standing on the right side of it.
Absolutely well said, Fasiha. So an inspiring quote that gets you up every morning. You are a firehouse, right? So what is one quote that really resonates with you?
It's going to be such an anticlimax. it's you know, Finding Nemo, Dory, the fish. Just keep swimming, just keep going.
Just keep going.
Yeah, because that's the one, eh?
And that's the way life goes, right?
That's the way life goes.
You've got to keep on moving, no matter what.
And just a reminder as well that you will have difficult days, you will have good days, but for every difficult day, there are probably 10 other good days in your life that are so worth the fight. And even if it's just one of those, we can make a difference too.
So it's all about adapting the attitude of gratitude, right?
I love that. Attitude of gratitude.
Fasiha, thank you so much for joining me on Visionary Paths. It has been an honor and a privilege to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So that brings us to the end of another wonderful segment. Join me, Farzana Mayet, next week as I chat to another visionary, game changer and change maker. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to you.